If you have seen my Coraline Theory parts 1 through 10, you're good to go here. If not, I suggest to at least watch my Coraline Core Theory before continuing, as I'm probably going to make a few references to things I've already said before, and that might lose you, and then you give me a thumbs down and negative comments because you're out of the loop. Anyways, I know some of you stay until the end of everything, and I love you for it, but the average viewer takes off between the 3 to 5 minute mark, so to be more concise and hopefully less confusing, I'll just put one theory or major observation per video to make them more digestible. Now that the core theory is out there, I will likely return to contradicting my previous theories, so be warned that not every theory will fit in a nice, neat package. After my most recent viewing of the film, which is probably the 50th time watching it now, I noticed that the sand is not actually sand at all. Well, hold on. The rats might be filled with sand still. It's a little harder to say on their part, but as for the doll, I noticed the pouring property wasn't quite consistent with sand. I've got 3 kids and they have a sandbox, so we are very familiar with how sand moves and behaves. And after looking again at the finished product sitting in the doll's mouth, I'm very confident that it's sawdust instead. The same is true for other Wybie. When he reveals his fake hand and blows it away, it's definitely not sand he's blowing. He's made out of loosely compressed sawdust. Why is that of any interest? Well, it turns out that after World War II, Ashland, Oregon, where the movie is set, was home to several sawmills that were very prosperous during the baby boomer era. Finding this clue means that it's much less likely that the sand ever had any magical properties, and instead, it's just an easily accessible resource that the Beldam could get her claws on. And yes, the movie has gone to that level of detail. Remember when Coraline goes to town with her parents and there was a Shakespeare festival? I kept beating my head against the wall trying to figure out why that was significant to the movie. Was that a reference to how old the Beldam was? What? Well, it turns out the Shakespeare festival is actually a legitimate event that brings in tons of tourism to Ashland, Oregon. So the creative team in Coraline went to an insane level to add in details about the town that didn't even matter for the plot of the story. How the Beldam got the sawdust is kind of up for debate, but I wouldn't be surprised if a nearby sawmill found an abandoned well and used it as their personal dumping ground. Remember, the EPA didn't exist until 1970, and we're talking about the 1940s and 50s here. So if you believe the theorizer's theory that the well is a secondary portal to the other world, that would give the Beldam a whole lot of sawdust at her disposal. But then why did the previous doll have cotton in it? Well, according to the Beldam's own words, she's been waiting for Coraline for a long time. She doesn't say that she's been waiting for a visitor, but for Coraline herself, which somewhat implies that the other mother has the ability to see into the future. Interestingly, the fairy race introduced in the True Blood series not only have the power to create other dimensions, but at least one of them is able to see on all planes and realities at the same time, which could explain the other world's creation and a future vision power. So if the Beldam is a fairy, or at least a partial fairy, then it's possible that she predicted Coraline coming to the other world before it actually happened. Meaning the opening sequence where the Beldam makes the Coraline doll may actually be set as far back as the 1960s when her last victim was secured. If that's the case, it stands to reason that the Beldam saw the other ghost children coming to her lair years before they did as well, and that she prepared their respective dolls ahead of time too. So if the Beldam is making dolls in advance with her visions, she could have made Mrs. Lovat's twin 60 plus years before she was taken. Is it coming together? The Beldam made the twin doll before the sawmill industry kicked into high gear in Ashland, which means she didn't have access to sawdust yet and had to use another material. Bam! Mystery solved as to why one doll was filled with cotton and one was filled with sawdust. But to dive deeper into the traits of the True Blood fairies, when those fairies die, they become piles of glittering fairy dust, which holds the same properties as sand. Okay, fine, the Beldam isn't dead, so she didn't become sand herself, but please remember that the book version of Coraline offers us a fairy in place of one of the ghost children. The ghost of a fairy would imply that her body is long gone, i.e. sand. So we may be dealing with two different substances that the Beldam is using to create objects with, which would make sense because the fairy dust would be extremely limited and the Beldam would have to use it sparingly in only her most important creations. If the rats are filled with sand, which is actually fairy dust, and the doll and other Wybie are made out of sawdust, that would explain the differences in their characteristics. Why the mice can leave the other world, why the doll doesn't move or talk independently, that we know of at least, and why other Wybie demonstrates that he can't go with Coraline to the real world because he's not made of the same stuff as the mice. Let me save you some grumbling in the comments here. If you're demanding to know how Coraline got away if the Beldam has the gift of foresight, the short answer is that Coraline never got away, but you need to put on my Coraline Core Theory to get more information on that. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed enough to like, subscribe, and share this video. I've also got a lot of other videos on my channel that you are fully encouraged to go check out. Plus, you can find me on Facebook at Say Halo Goodbye, which is my gamer tag, or Twitter at _Fanily.